Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. This is your solo host, Dan Wiseman, coming to you today on my ones once again. Dan Morgan is still out in the States doing amazing things with goal, which means for the time being, although not for much longer, I will add, you're stuck with me to go through all of the biggest news stories revolving around the world of Aston Villa. And we've got a few today, some bigger than others. I will admit we got the away kit this morning, which is very exciting. I'm a big fan of it. We've been running for a little while when we would get that through, and it is an absolute beauty. It makes me even sadder that the new badge isn't sticking around beyond the end of next season, but we remain to see what happens on that front. We've also had Wesley leave on a permanent deal, alas, and I'm happy for the club. Ultimately, it's good that we have Wesley off the books. Ultimately, this is a transfer that really hasn't worked out. We spent between 20 and 25 million on Wesley the season we were promoted back to the Premier League. He obviously had that terrible knee injury, and then since then he's sort of been some loans and stuff like that. He spent last season in the Segunda out in Spain with Levante. Had an okay time. It wasn't great. I'm surprised that a championship club has taken a permanent punt on Wesley, although it should be said it is only a 1-year contract at the Bet365. I thought a loan would have been in order. It's interesting that, Morgan Sanson seems set for a period of sustained loans, but Wesley's been the first one to find a permanent home, and it means that Villa maintain their stance as a club that isn't great from a selling point of view more often than not, but still good for the club and good for Wesley. Hopefully he can thrive in a permanent home and have some luck still in the Midlands. But the big news today is obviously Juventus' ban from the Europa Conference Leagues and UEFA competitions in general. For the 2023-24 season, the old lady won't be able to feature in any European competition, and this is massive news for Aston Villa. It looks like Juventus has been kicked out for breaching FFP rules, which, given all of the recent scandals about their finances, the decisions that led to all of their board leaving the club towards the back end of last year, doesn't really come as much of a surprise that they've been caught out for cooking the books. Chelsea have as well, although it's been noted that they have been caught out for submitting incomplete financial records, though they have only been fined, whereas obviously Juventus have this competition ban from the Conference League. Juve picked up a fine of 17.41 million to go along with their ban, whilst Chelsea, I'll say, just got a lower fee of 8.57 million. And this is big for the Conference League because Juventus were the big fish in the competition. They were the bookmakers' favourites before a ball was kicked. And who can blame them? They have an amazing record in European competitions and a squad that, to be honest with you, isn't really in the name of the Conference League. It's not what that competition is about. So, to be honest with you, I'm like half and half on whether that Conference League is really there for the Aston Villas of the world. It's there to give clubs that don't often have the chance to thrive on the European scene a chance to go and play football. I think when you look at the quality that's in Juventus' squad and now in Villa's squad as well, obviously it's amazing for Villa fans because it puts us in with a chance of winning the competition, but I'm not sure it's in the true spirit of why UEFA created this competition ultimately, to see sides like Juventus in it. What is interesting now is obviously they must now be replaced. So the FIGC, the Italian FA, must now go on to notify UEFA of which club shall replace Juventus in the playoff draw. Now, this is likely to be Fiorentina, who got to the final of last year's competition where they lost to West Ham in that late goal from Jared Bowen. They finished 8th in Serie A, which means they would now pick up the UEFA Conference League spot. The Italian club president, Gianluca Ferrero, has confirmed that they won't be appealing this decision, which means it is final. UEFA have decided that Juventus will be banned from the UEFA Conference League next season, and that an unnamed Italian club, though it looks extremely likely like it will be Fiorentina, will be replacing them. And speaking of appeals, a slightly lesser news story, but still one that's been rumbling on, has been Osasuna, who were another side that were seeded, unseeded, were flitting between the two sides, as Villa have been throughout the summer. Osasuna were kicked out of the UEFA Conference League because they'd been suspended from UEFA competitions, similarly to Juventus, following a match-fixing scandal that occurred all the way back in 2013 and 2014. Osasuna themselves actually reported the incidents of match-fixing to the authorities all the way back in those years and to the Spanish justice system, and they were declared a victim of the match-fixing, with the individual directors involved, who were some higher up figures at the club, identified as the perpetrators of this. So obviously Osasuna have appealed the ban. It's been successful. They took it all the way up to the UEFA, the Court of Arbitration for Sport. UEFA rescinded the decision, which means Osasuna are now back in the Conference League. And this kind of back and forth, combined with the playoff rounds that are currently going on for the Conference Leagues, mean that this has had a big impact on which sides will be seeded versus unseeded for that big playoff round draw, which is just a couple of weeks away now. Now, there are two parts from which this draw is made. It's not a very complex system. You're either seeded or you are unseeded. And as that means in most sports, in theory, more seeded teams should qualify for the competitions because they will be playing against sides that have lower UEFA coefficient rankings based on their histories and everything like that, which takes into account all sorts of different factors. So currently, as it stands, the seeded teams are as follows: Eintracht Frankfurt, Lille, Club Brugge, Basel, Panathinaikos, AZ Alkmaar, Servette, Genk, Dinamo Kiev, Fenerbahce, CFR Cluj, Midtjylland, Partizan Belgrade, PAOK, Maccabi Tel Aviv, Victoria Pilsen, and now Aston Villa, who have jumped up because UEFA had that ban. It's interesting now, the unseeded teams include Osasuna, Bodo Glimt, Lech Poznan, Rapid Vienna, Hapoel Beersheva, Djurgården, Apoel, Besiktas, CSK Sofia, Rijeka, Twente, Arauca, Victoria Guimarães, which is interesting because that is the club that Villa have now part ownership stakes in. So that could be a potentially complicated draw should those come out of the parts. FSBC, so that's Steaua Bucharest, Legia Warsaw, and Rosenborg. And so you can see there that obviously there's still some big clubs in that unseeded side of the draw, the likes of Besiktas, but those seeded teams are the favourites to progress for the big group draw. So that draw for the playoff round takes place on the 7th of August 2023, which is just a few days before our season opener at St James's Park. And the matches then from that draw in the playoff round, which will see who progresses through to the group stage, take place on August 24th, 4 days as the schedule stands after a home game against Everton and 3 days before an away game at Burnley. The return legs would then take place on the 31st of August 2023, which is just a few days before Liverpool at Anfield for the Villa. And then the group stage would then run from the 21st of December, so just under a month from those final playoff games, to the 14th of December 2023, building up to that big old final in Athens on the 29th of May 2024. And the reason why all this is so big, the reason why Juventus' ban affects Villa so much, is because now the bookmakers have Aston Villa as the favourites to win the Europa Conference League. After them is Eintracht Frankfurt. You've then got whichever Serie A club is re-entered into the draw. Obviously, they're not currently listed in the bookmakers because it hasn't been officially announced. But as I said earlier, it looks like Fiorentina are going to be that club. So you imagine that given that, especially as they reached the final of last year's competition and lost to West Ham, that they would be in and around Frankfurt, maybe second, maybe third in the bookmakers' odds. You've then got Lille, and then finally, Spanish club Osasuna. So this is massive for Villa. This is the season where we really are up against it. Expectations for the first time are quite high on the Villa boys this season. It'll be interesting to see whether that kind of rubber stamp mark as favourites, which takes into account all sorts of things, but not least of all Unai Emery's incredible record in European competitions. It'd be really interesting to see how that all takes place. So yes, the first playoff round draw is the 7th of August, which is a Monday. It's, believe it or not, the week after next. Pretty crazy. It's a summer bank holiday for any listeners up in Scotland. But guys, I think Dan and I are going to be live streaming that draw, which is going to be super, super exciting. So make sure you stick around for that. There's going to be a lot of laughs. We'll go through all the different teams involved in that playoff round. A real who's who of who's left in the Conference League by that point. We've got all the teams that are currently playing now for a spot to be in that draw. So there's plenty of moving parts for the competition, as there is with the list of favourites as well, because obviously that can totally change depending on who drops down from the Europa League, etc. But guys, there's only one place to stay on top of all that, and it's right here on the Villa Philip podcast. As always, thank you very much for listening. This is a real quick whistle-stop tour of Villa's path to the 2023-2024 UEFA Europa Conference League. We're super excited about it, and you know that this is the best place to keep up to date with Villa's path in the competition. So make sure you like, subscribe, drop a comment. I'm really interested to see how do you see Villa stacking up in these competitions. From those list of unseeded teams, are there anybody that you particularly like? Anyone that you'd want to avoid? There's plenty of juicy away days in there, so let me know your thoughts on that. There's also a link tree down in the description as well, which we'd love for you to check out. There's places all over our socials where you can get exclusive Villa content. And let's face it, why wouldn't you want some of that? Guys, as always, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. I'll see you in just a couple of days. Up the Villa.